bodyguards, all of our brave men and women, territorial defense, ordinary Ukrainians remain very high. As we said during the past year, as we said when we realized and we saw already all of you, with all of the world, that Putin has made a decision which he has been debating for quite some time, and as we see during the past 3 days, we are very resolute in defending our country. People are returning to Ukraine, even though it's very difficult because there are no flights that go into Ukraine, but people from all over the globe go back home to defend our country. And we will continue to do so, and we really hope that all civilized world will not only be with us like they are now, but that we together will be able to stop Mr. Putin. And return peace to our country, return peace to Europe, and allow Ukraine to continue as a whole sovereign country, peacefully develop as our people would like to. Thank you, and I have time for some questions. Yes.
Are you calling on the U.S. and its allies to ban Russia from SWIFT, and do you think this will have an impact on Putin's actions?
We ask from the United States and from all of our friends and allies to actually ban Russia from everywhere. And of course, disconnecting them from SWIFT is one of the, we believe, very effective actions. And we are also discussing all other potential sanctions which we are positive Russia deserves. Because being a terrorist state, attacking a sovereign country without any reasons, without any pretext, and more importantly, attacking civilians. I mean, I think everyone saw yesterday the footage of the rocket getting into a residential complex in Kiev. This is one of many. We can show you pictures, which you see here. We can send you videos, which we all store and record, of numerous destruction to private houses, to hospitals, to schools, all over the place. So not only this is unjust war and baseless war, not only while waging this war on us on a daily basis, on a minute basis, they are doing all these crimes against humanity. There should be severe punishment for that. And full isolation of Russia, we believe, is the right punishment for that.
Could I ask, sorry, President Biden announced $315 million in sanctions. I'm curious, what more can America do in this case, in your opinion? And also for American citizens who are interested in this cause, what would Ukraine be calling on them to do?
Thank you very much. Yes, we're very glad that right after the call that President Biden had with President Zelensky yesterday, we saw two very positive announcements. First, there's the support, the $350 million presidential drawdown, which is already in a discussion, and hopefully we will be getting this support very quickly in Ukraine. This all is very much appreciated. This is what our armed forces need at the moment, and this is what we actually call upon all other friends and allies to support us with. So again, as we said from the beginning, you know, we will defend our home, we will not surrender, and we need all the support that we can get from the free world, because we are fighting for the right cause. We are defending our homes, we are defending our families, we are defending democracy, we are defending our choice to be sovereign, but we are also defending Europe. We are at the far front of this fight with the autocratic, crazy regime that we have to the east of us. And I also would like to say that, you know, please pay attention that the rockets that are sent to destroy our troops and that the military personnel and tanks and all the machinery that is coming, they are not only coming from the east. They are coming from Crimea, which is illegally occupied and by Russia, but they are also coming from Belarus. And Belarus is also responsible for this attack on Ukraine. Yes, please.
Talking about the support that you've had from the global community, can you tell us about the detail, the smaller scale stuff? Are you in daily contact with the White House at the embassy? Are you getting sort of on the ground help here in America from other embassies from other countries?
This anti-war coalition that I mentioned is a true coalition of friends. So not only that we have, I wouldn't even call it on the daily discussions with the administration, but more like hourly discussions. So we are in close contact with everyone here in the United States. I have great support from all of the ambassadors of our friends and allies from other European countries, and not only European. The coalition is beyond already just NATO or European Union or the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and other people who believe in democratic values. So we are in constant discussions, and we are working together in order to stop Mr. Putin. Now, we understand that there are processes and democratic rules and everything else, but time is of the essence here. It's a full-fledged war in Ukraine. Ukrainians are fighting with everything for our homes, and the support that we need is yesterday. So essentially, again, we are very grateful, and when we work with our friends and allies, we are grateful for everything we received. We are grateful for a great communication, and we need more, because we see that the sanctions that we have, they are great. The support that we have is also great, but we need everything now, because this is the moment when we have to mobilize all the resources and all the support in order to not only stop Putin, but also save every life that we can save. This is what is at stake here.
Is there anything
Yeah.
the General would like to add?
General, would you like to add
If you
something?
mention humanitarian, I can add.
See, I will be talking about war, and General will be talking about humanitarian.
Talking about humanitarian, I'd like to say that we captured around 200 Russian soldiers, some of them 19 years old, not trained at all, badly equipped. We treat them according to Geneva Convention, according to international humanitarian law. And you can find on YouTube or videos we can send you where we allow them to call their parents. Parents completely surprised. We allow them to, we give them food, water, whatever, and treat them according to Geneva Convention.
General, can we get your name and correct title, please?
I'm Major General Boris Kremnetsky, Defense Attaché at the Embassy.
If you wouldn't mind spell that, please, sir.
Boris Kremenetsky.
Could you please specify what kind of weapons and military assistance Ukraine does need right now? And do you talk with the Biden administration about the aircraft defense, anti-aircraft defense?
Well, I'm working with the Pentagon on our daily basis, and there is a list of crucial requirements, and we still need more capabilities. And I can assure you that what we received already were used in a proper way, just into targets.
You know, it's been said, of course, that the Russians are trying to conduct a decapitation of the government. What do you need in practical terms in the coming days to prevent that? And speaking of the concern you mentioned at the top, do you have gas masks? Are you requesting gas masks? Do you think that's a live concern?
Well, maybe I can answer that. So we intend to defend our country, and every precautions are taken in order not to allow them to get to our government. At the same time, President has made a decision to stay in Kiev, to stay with people and defend the country while being in Kiev and being in the country. So that is why we cannot allow Kiev to be taken, and that is why everyone in Kiev, all the armed forces, police, territorial defense, will be defending Kiev until we defend Kiev. And during the last night here, but day in Kiev, there were numerous reports of ordinary citizens essentially finding, capturing all the Russian perpetrators who came into Kiev pretending to be Ukrainian citizens, but unfortunately they do not know Kiev, they do not know our language, they have no idea what Ukraine is and who we are. So it's pretty easy to spot them, and we are finding them, capturing them, detaining them, and doing everything possible to defend Kiev. Now, even during a couple of hours before we speak, there was street shooting in Kiev, so some of these groups were able to get into some places in Kiev, and so far we're in full control of the situation.
Do you believe that you need gas masks?
Well, we, first of all, during the past 8 years, we have worked really good with all of our friends and allies in reforming the army and getting what we need for different type of situations. Second, we right now, as General said, work very actively with our colleagues in Pentagon and you know, on the exact list of what do we need in order to develop our capabilities, including different range of items. I will not be disclosing what exactly are we working, but the list is very wide, and we're also coordinating with other friends and allies. So we are not only getting, only during the last couple of hours, a number of countries announced that they will support us in addition to the support we are getting from the United States by additional weapons. Estonia, you name it. Germany, we just had a news that after many discussions before, Germany also decided to provide Ukraine with the defensive weapons. So it's Europe and transatlantic community, I should say, is very much united on this. We just need it faster so that we can save more lives. Thank you very much. Please pray for Ukraine, and we are fighting for our home. So that is always a fight that ends with victory. Thank you.
Can I just, sorry, just one more question? On a personal level,
Yes.
you're here, I'm guessing you all have an awful lot of family back home. Tell us how that is and how you were dealing with that as well as trying to do the job.
We are very proud that our families are there fighting for this cause. Of course, we are very concerned about them. But if anything, it motivates us to work and hard even more here to support them and to support from here. So right now, all Ukraine, including our diplomatic forces, are united, and we have only one goal: to defend our country, get to peace, and stop Mr. Putin. And we will do it.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Melissa Brennan. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday. Currently about 3:45 here in Phoenix, Arizona, 5:45 on the East Coast, 12:45 in the morning in Kyiv. Of course, we have been showing you all day the latest out of Russia and Ukraine and the invasion happening overseas. But I do want to direct your attention to this promo that we have here. We are going to be celebrating Black History Month here at the top of the hour at 4 o'clock here in Phoenix, 6 o'clock Eastern. So we want to make sure that you join us for that. Some great interviews from my colleague, Rain Augustine. You won't want to miss it. Very, very great content coming up. For now, I want to bring you out to some Live Now looks across the country. This is, of course, the Capitol, live Washington, D.C. A lot happening behind those doors, of course. And Chicago, a beautiful, beautiful shot there of the skyline. And we will end here in New York City in Manhattan. This is right outside of the Fox News headquarters, right there in Midtown. You can see Radio City there across the way. For now, we're going to go back into an interview by my colleague Andrew Kraft. He spoke with a few foreign policy experts about what exactly is going on in Russia and Ukraine and how that will affect us here in the States.
All right, joining me now here on Live Now from Fox to further discuss the Russian invasion into Ukraine is former U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine, former U.S. Ambassador to NATO as well, Kurt Volker. Ambassador Volker, thanks for being with us. I wanted to get your reaction to President Biden's remarks today, issuing new punitive sanctions and consequences. In your view, are they adequate enough?
No, I think these are the measures that we should have done 2 months ago. If you remember, President Biden was asked, will these affect Putin's decision making, or will they affect Russians? We'll ask me in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly the point, that we should have done this a couple of months ago when we saw the buildup happening, to try to prevent it and to try to have impact on Russia today. And in addition, there were things excluded from this package. There were good things in the package, to be sure. Some of the banks mentioned, some of the financial impact mentioned. But there were also individuals left out, the energy sector was left out, the SWIFT financial transfer system was left out. And I appreciate that the administration is trying to coordinate all this with our European allies and act in unison. But in this case, I think we need to start thinking about leading more, because this is a dire circumstance. And I don't think we can settle for a situation where Russia takes over all of Ukraine, imposes its military forces there, and we're just applying sanctions.
Also, do you think the phased approach is working to our disadvantage? We were promised swift and severe sanctions. Kind of a shock and awe approach would be better in your view?
Yes, swift and severe sanctions would be good, and we still need them. Let's have that. Let's push the Europeans to do as much as possible. But I'm concerned that we are not doing anything currently to help the Ukrainian military. They are being attacked by Russia overnight, airstrikes, missile strikes, tank columns moving. They are fighting back valiantly, and they need more help. And so I would still like to see us proceeding with deliveries, with equipment, with ammunition, with trainers who could help the Ukrainians integrate this in whatever way we can do that. We need to be in a much more proactive position to help Ukraine defend itself. I think it's debatable whether we should have ruled out U.S. military forces being present in Ukraine to help them. But clearly the administration has ruled that out. But short of that, there's a lot more we can do.
What about something that is being floated right now about arming some type of Ukrainian opposition or rebellion? Would that make matters worse?
Yeah, let's not give in to defeatism and say that we're only going to fund a resistance. Let's try to help the Ukrainian government, Ukrainian military survive.
My question now for you is about NATO, of which you know a lot. Is NATO aligned right now? We've seen some disagreements, especially on the SWIFT international banking system. There's going to be yet another summit held tomorrow. Why another summit? It doesn't seem like these summits have produced any meaningful impact other than maybe symbolism. What are you thinking is going to happen tomorrow?
It's a great question, because Summits are meant to be ways of showing unity and resolve, that we are acting together. But when they come up short in terms of deliverables, then it starts to look a little hollow. And so I am confident that the diplomats there are talking to each other about what the deliverables will be. But so far, we haven't seen a sufficient level of action from ourselves, from our NATO allies, from the EU, to really treat Russia's invasion and aggression against Ukraine for what it is, and to do everything we can to reverse it. I remember when I was a young officer in the State Department, I was surprised but impressed by President George H.W. Bush after Iraq invaded Kuwait. And he simply came out and said, "This will not stand." And then he and James Baker went about assembling a global coalition to do everything possible that enabled them to remove Iraq from Kuwait. I think we're in a similar moment, a harder moment, because Russia has nuclear weapons. But we have to be viewing this with the same eyes, that this is unacceptable and we will not let this stand.
Those troops that were readied and on alert about a month ago will now be sent to Germany, about 7,000 of them, to shore up our NATO allies in the eastern flank. Does Putin want the Baltics? Does Putin want Poland? Is that what we should be looking for next?
Well, what he has asked for in his demands to NATO that were given in December is the demilitarization by NATO of presence in the Baltic states and in Poland. He wants everything rolled back to pre-1997 in terms of the military architecture in Europe. He claims falsely that NATO promised never to put military forces in the territory of new members. Not true, but now he wants that enforced by having NATO pull back military forces. So in this respect, I think what the administration is doing, sending forces to Poland, to Romania, and headquarters in Germany and other allies as well, like France or Germany or the UK, putting troops on the territory of these new NATO members is a tremendously important signal, because it is explicitly rejecting what Putin is demanding.
You know, I wanted your opinion as well. Is it safe to say that U.S.-Russia relations are dead, or are they just paused? Is there any way to come back from this at this point in time? Have we essentially cut off relations with Russia?
Right. U.S.-Putin relations should be dead. And I think we are getting to that point. We should support the people of Russia. They've been living under Putin for 20-some years, and it has just only gotten worse and worse for them. They deserve to live in a country that has more freedom and democracy and prosperity and justice than they live in. So we should be fully aligned with the Russian people, but our relationship with Putin should be over.
And are you foreseeing maybe indirect or direct impacts on the Russian people? We've seen massive protests in many major Russian cities over this. The ruble fell the lowest in its history. The stock market in Russia fell by half today. This kind of is a harbinger for Putin, is it not? Should he be worried about his own country?
Yes, I think that this is where we are headed right now. These things happened in the shock of Russia's invasion yesterday. What we have to do is make these kind of impacts long-term, even increase them, and show Putin that this is going to affect his ability to rule inside Russia, not only his ability to wage war on Ukraine. So this should be our target, and we should be messaging that, mobilizing that, enhancing this for as much as we can do to try to get Putin to realize that this is self-destructive.
I want to just game out a few scenarios specifically regarding the capital city of Kyiv. Can you tell us what you have been in touch with, your contacts on the ground there in Ukraine? Are they preparing for some type of, urban warfare in the streets of Kyiv? Do you think that is a distinct possibility?
They are certainly preparing for everything. They're preparing immediately for new airstrikes and new missile strikes. And those will be principally against military targets, but you can't rule out Russia going after civilian targets as well. They're bringing forces in to protect the capital from other parts of the country. So they're preparing for tank battles and pushing back Russia as they try to approach the city. And then finally, yes, if it comes to that, they are preparing for fighting for the city itself.
Also, I wanted to kind of game out a scenario where in the worst case scenario, President Zelensky has to go into exile. The Ukrainian government, high-ranking officials have to go into exile. I know that is a very defeatist attitude, but it's something that's being talked about Who will take them in, and will the United States immediately recognize them as the de facto government, if you will?
Right. So this is also an excellent question. I have not heard an answer to this from the administration or from the European Union. Frankly, I'm glad, because we just saw the Pentagon come out today and say, oh, Kiev may fall within 96 hours. That is not the kind of messaging we want to be pushing out there now. We should be saying that we're impressed with how much the Ukrainians are fighting, and we will assist them. That's what I would like to hear, rather than, okay, the capital's going to fall. As far as a government, if Russia takes over all of Ukraine and imposes its own government, no one will recognize the legitimacy of that government. No one will recognize Russia's claims over this. And it would be entirely logical to recognize the continuity of Ukrainian government in exile. But we're not there yet. We should be helping the Ukrainians weather this and ultimately maintain their country.
Ambassador Volker, just final thoughts as we go into the weekend here.
Yeah, everyone should be prepared for the worst. Russia, I think, probed last night, a lot of airstrikes, a lot of missile strikes, trying to land paramilitary forces to take over air bases, mostly not succeeding, some succeeding. They're going to do it again, and they're going to do it again, and they're going to do it again. They're also, fighting on the front lines and trying to advance. They are succeeding in taking territory north of Crimea and east of Crimea. They're going to try to expand that footprint, and they will continue to try to go to Kyiv. And so we should be viewing this as seriously as it can be viewed. This is a major effort to take over a sovereign European country. We should declare this unacceptable, and we should be doing everything we can to help the Ukrainians.
Ambassador Kurt Volker, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
A great conversation there by my colleague Andrew Kraft, of course, on the rising tensions in Russia and Ukraine. We are going to go to a quick 2-minute commercial break. When we come back, we are going to dive into other top stories here. I'm including the latest out of Ukraine from Fox News correspondents and more. That's after the break.
Ukraine's outmatched military has stood firm against 3 days of Russian attacks. Now there are signs that the fighting may get more intense in the days ahead.
Fires lit up the night in Ukraine as Russian forces stepped up their attacks, hitting a huge oil depot near an airbase and destroying a gas pipeline in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. The capital of Kyiv, its streets eerily empty, coming under shelling Sunday morning, signs of an escalation amid reports of Russian frustration.
it's getting worse by the minute, and the Russians are getting very upset from the situation, and they will get more and more upset. And I think that this is going to get worse for the people there who lives in Ukraine.
Those trapped by the fighting look for any way out, even by foot, hauling luggage. For those who manage to escape, reunions and relief. The UN says more than 360,000 have fled in the first 4 days, with huge numbers on the move. But as the attacks continue for a fourth day, Ukrainian officials are looking for more help from around the world.
We are defending democracy, we are defending our choice to be sovereign, but we are also defending Europe. We are at the far front of this fight.
But perhaps one hopeful sign, a Russian delegation arrived in Belarus saying they're ready to talk. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants to talk too, but not in a nation that let Russia stage its attacks.
Other cities can be a platform for a meeting. Of course, we want peace. We want to meet and put an end to the war.
But Zelensky is also calling for Russia to be stripped of its seat on the UN Security Council, saying Russia's invasion is tantamount to genocide. In Washington, Mallory Rivera, Fox News.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday here on Live Now from Fox. We are celebrating Black History Month. This week, we're bringing you two in-depth conversations. Live Now's Rain Augustine sat down with Louisiana's Lieutenant Governor Billy Nussinger. The two share an emotional conversation about heroic and historic events that predate yet propelled the civil rights movement. Here's part one of that conversation.
Back to Live Now from Fox, everyone. My name is Rain Augustine, and right now I have the honor of speaking to Louisiana's Lieutenant Governor, Billy Nungesser. Welcome to Live Now from Fox. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And I think this is going to be a really insightful conversation.
I'm excited. Good to be with you.
So, continuing our special coverage of Black History Month, I was doing my research on the Civil Rights Trails website. And I was really struck by a powerful quote, and it says, "How do you go from slavery to freedom when there's no blueprint?" And I'm learning that Louisiana actually played some very key roles in this very blueprint, so to speak.
Absolutely. Some real magnificent champions, heroes, brave men and women that really set the tone for what happened in other states. And when I first got elected, in my first tourism trip to Arizona, to see Alabama and Mississippi talk about their civil rights trail, and I leaned over to our tourism director and said, do we have a civil rights trail? I said, I don't think so. I said, why not? I don't know. So when I came back and put a team together and went to work, and at every trip, at every stop around the state, I was blown away about the real heroes that really set the stage for many of the things that happen in other states right here in Louisiana.
And there are so many different civil rights markers that we could talk about. It truly is an experience for tourists, and it's also an educational experience. But let's start with one theme, which is segregation. As we know, much of Louisiana and the Deep South was segregated during this time. I mean, you're talking water fountains, public swimming pools, basketball courts. Even my own alma mater, University of Louisiana at Lafayette, was one of the first state-backed institutions to integrate in the Deep South. But I would like to talk about public schools during this time. You recently unveiled a marker at McDonough 19 in New Orleans. What's the story behind this civil rights marker?
Well, you know, I was scared to go to school in a new grade with new kids in a new year. I cannot imagine those 3 little girls being led in by police on horseback. And the fact that Leona Tate is still alive, that we could hear it from her mouth say, you know, I said, Mama, why do I got to go? I thought it was Mardi Gras. Why do I got to go to school on Mardi Gras? She said, oh no, honey, this is no parade. Keep your head down. What an incredible, brave mom. And those kids, I get goosebumps thinking about going into that school. Like you said, there was no blueprint. Hadn't been done before. Incredible, unknown.
So how did these students get chosen to integrate this particular school?
Well, I think it was their brave parents that said, my kids deserve an education just like everyone else, and had the will and the bravery. Yes, and you can see it in her heart when she speaks. Incredible lady.
You know, I was watching a few snippets of her interview, and to your point, she's only 68 years old. What do you think that says about the enormous progress we've made in such a short amount of time?
It really does. And you know, when I first started this journey, I had a lady stand up and said, I got a problem, Mr. Nungesser. You're going to make money on tourists, on all that pain and suffering. And I went home that night and I didn't sleep. And I talked to my wife and I said, I can't do this if it's going to upset people. And I went back to that lady at the next meeting. I said, listen, we have 2 things we did under my office, Uniquely Louisiana and Homework Louisiana, where you can go get tutored. How about if we take all this great history that I didn't learn in school and we put in an educational tool that every parent, school can download to teach the civil rights trail and what actually happened. And that gave her the comfort level that some greater good other than tourists would come out of all this hard work that our team is doing around the state. So I'm excited about finishing the trail, which we'll probably never finish. But we're taking those spots, adding markers every month. We're working on getting a home. I've offered space in the Cabildo, 3 floors for the Civil Rights Museum. So we want to have a home for that museum to display all the videos. And you know, the gentleman that 17 days out of law school filed the law school, the bus boycott in Baton Rouge, to be able to have him there, and when he read his name on the plaque, to see him cry was unbelievable. And the fact that we could honor him, I'm gonna cry thinking about it, while he's still alive, just means that much more, and capture his story. Just incredible heroes.
We're going to finish that conversation here in a few minutes. But first, we want to bring you a special interview with Leona Tate, one of 4 students to integrate McDonough 19 in 1960.
That was to take part in the desegregation. It was because it was a low-income area. 2 schools were selected. Nobody knew what the schools were going to be until that morning. William France was in the upper 9th ward, and McDonough 19 is in the lower 9th ward. I remember seeing the black car pull up in front of the door, and 2 men got out, and they came to the doorway, and it was time for my mom and I to leave, and I remember her saying, when you get in the car, sit to the back of the seat and don't put your face to the window. As we got ready to turn on St. Claude Avenue, I noticed crowds of people, you know, it was masses of people, and I could see police on horseback holding the people back. So the only thing I could relate it to was that there was a parade that was coming, because we watched the parade on that street, and I wanted to know, well, why are we going to school on Mardi Gras? And everybody else is watching the parade, and she said, no, it's not Mardi Gras.
On November 14th, 1960, 3 of the girls entered McDonough 19. They encountered mobs of spitting, cursing, stone-throwing whites.
When we arrived, school was in full session. So then we started noticing that parents were taking their kids out of school. And that really made us think that they were going outside to watch the parade, and we were still in the classroom.
You took your boy out the first day?
No, I didn't send him Monday.
Oh, you didn't send him at
Governor
all?
Davis set a holiday, and I did abide by him. He is the governor of the state, and I did abide by him.
We were not allowed to play outside. We couldn't go to the cafeteria. And I'm sure it was for protection. The water fountain was off. We couldn't drink out the water fountain. Anything we ate or drank, we had to bring to school with us. Nobody could see in the building, and we couldn't see out. We weren't even allowed to go on the side of the class where there was a window. We left McDonough 19 after 2nd grade. McDonough 19 had become predominantly black, and the thing was to keep us in a white school. So we were transferred to T.J. Sims. This time we did not have U.S. Marshals or police protection. The children didn't leave. They came to school with whatever they were told to do. That was not a good experience. That's where we really faced integration for the first time. I don't know, it was very hard to stay focused, but we had to. We were deathly afraid to go eat lunch in the cafeteria, because either somebody was going to spit in your plate or they were going to knock it out of your hand. Deathly afraid to use the restroom, you know. If somebody would see you going in the restroom, they were coming in behind you. Our safe haven there wasn't the classroom anymore, under the stairwell. It was outside in the yard, on a tree stump. That was our area. When I came back after Katrina, it was never my intention to start a foundation. Everybody was screaming for schools. They needed schools. So my mission was just to try to get McDonough 19 open up as a school again. But everybody that I tried to talk to wanted to know, well, what's your foundation about? What are y'all doing? You know, I said, well, I don't have a foundation. So I couldn't get any answers without having one. So I got a couple of my family members and community members together, and we formed the foundation. I feel good about what we're doing. We've partnered with People's Institute, and they go around the country teaching on doing racism classes. They want to do a community, teaching on doing racism from kindergarten through high school. We want to do the interpretive center and telling the civil rights movements, not just what we did in the school, just things that highlighted New Orleans, you know, in this movement. Because when I get invited to a lot of schools, the children don't know the history of what happened here in New Orleans. They saw them somewhere else. Now, I can go out of state, and they know all about us, but they're not being taught in the schools here. So that kind of put me on a mission to try to get the story told, and it needs to be told.
We're going to finish that conversation after the break, but we are also going to hear again from Lieutenant Governor Nussinger when we learn about how one all-black Army unit paved the way for desegregation in the United States military. A lot more ahead here on Live Now from Fox. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox's special Black History Month special coverage. We're going to continue our conversation with the Louisiana Lieutenant Governor. He and Rain discuss the history of Camp Beauregard, whose history dates back to World War I and the tank battalion that helped integrate the U.S. military.
That's amazing. And speaking of incredible heroes, I mean, we all can't go a day without thanking our men and women of service. And this story was a little personal to me because my grandfather, Midgie Johnson, served in World War II and was in one of the first integrated Army units. So let's talk about Camp Beauregard, the 761st Battalion. What's the history and impact behind this?
Well, think about these. Not only did they fight for a country that didn't accept them as equals under General Patton, they were recognized by the President Truman. You know, he desegregated the Army because of that platoon by executive order, and they were determined, tough, well-trained, courageous, and you know, they were nicknamed Patton's Panthers, an incredible fighting force that fought for 183 days straight in 6 countries without stopping. That love and passion they had to serve, and they came back to a country where they weren't free. I just can't imagine that. And to tell that story today and to recognize and honor those heroes is just incredible.
Yes, I agree. What do you think would have happened if that 761st Battalion didn't have the opportunity to fight and serve in the way that it did?
Well, you just by being recognized by the President of the United States, and we all know the history of General Patton, but to call for him to call them one of the elite teams and couldn't have done it without him, just all of the history behind those brave men that went into battle time and time again, just incredible. And knowing they were fighting for a country where they were not free.
Very incredible. So, Lieutenant Governor, you touched on this a little bit at the forefront of our conversation, but you know, recently our country's been through a lot, right? Global pandemic, we've had social justice movements, and I think we're all still healing and unifying. So I think some people might ask, honestly, to state the obvious, Republican Lieutenant Governor, white male, why is it so important to you to make sure that these historical civil rights markers are unveiled throughout the state?
You know, I grew up in the public schools. I never saw anything to do with the Civil Rights Trail, but I was always taught by my parents to treat everyone equal. And as I go around the state and I uncover these incredible heroes and stories, it's so important that we, you know, I believe there's bad history. And a lot of people, some of these stories are traumatic, but we've got to educate people. And why do some people today feel it's not far enough? We've got to continue to respect and teach the history, the good and the bad, so people realize, and so the bad doesn't repeat itself ever. And you know, listen, I didn't realize how close this was in our lifetime. Like you said, she's only 60-something years old, and I'm 63. So I just didn't know what was going on even around me as a child. So to be able to make people today of all ages realize that incredible journey, I've taken it on personally because it's such an incredible, and every time we can interview a family member, you know, when the AZ Young Park, that Bogalusa March, we'll be in Bogalusa soon to put that marker up. To know women, men, children marched over 100 miles in that heat to the state capitol. Just can't imagine that.
Yeah. So before I let you go, I know you have a busy agenda ahead of you. You know, there might be some history throughout the state of Louisiana that the locals may know about. How do they get in touch with the Civil Rights Trail to maybe share their stories and talk about locations and continue to educate and inform everyone?
Yes, you can go to the Civil Rights Trail. You can log on, make comments, give us input. We're going to continue. We've got about, I think, 11 more sites picked out, but that's not the end. We're learning things every day. And I tell you, the parts in Louisiana was so historical. Prior to us having a trail, only one location in the whole country was on the National Civil Rights Trail. We got 9 added since our journey began, and we got 2 Louisiana members put on the national board because of our efforts.
Wow, I think that says a lot.
It really does. And I'll tell you, it's the educational part of this is going to be invaluable for generations to come. Because even though it was only not that long ago, things have changed a great deal. And the longer we get away from it, and those people are no longer with us, all of these videos and all these things we're uncovering will serve us well and for generations to come. And we're going to reach out to all the
refugees from Ukraine. More than 300,000 people are already believed to have crossed the border into neighboring Poland. Authorities there have set up emergency shelters to house the new arrivals. Some families are even opening up their homes to Ukrainian families. But the situation in some places on the border has turned into a humanitarian crisis with limited access to food and sanitation. It is believed that as many as 2 million Ukrainians have migrated to Poland since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. So Poland is one of the main destinations for people fleeing fighting, but Germany is also preparing to give refugees shelter. Around 2,000 Ukrainians have already arrived here, and many more are expected.
The train is from Warsaw, but some of its passengers have escaped hell. The first refugees in what is the largest war in Europe this century. Among them, Vita, who until just days ago enjoyed a peaceful life in Zhytomyr, northwest Ukraine.
It was February 24th. It was very sudden. My mother called me at 6 a.m. and told me, "We're at war."